I started out by breaking them down into some more manageable pieces. I like to set down some pieces of foam insulation on my workbench to provide a safe place for the blade to cut into, and I use this Kreg Ripcut circular saw guide to quickly and accurately break the plywood down. And because watching me endlessly cut plywood down isn't very helpful, I want to let you know that I have full step-by-step plans available on my website at spencleydesignco.com or linked down in the description below. Those plans have everything you need and guide you through the entire process with detailed diagrams and all the relevant dimensions. Oh yeah, they're in imperial and metric now. You're welcome. And if you don't have one of these circular saw guides, just use a track saw to break the plywood down. And before I start cutting anything else up, let's jump into SketchUp so you can see how this whole thing is going to come together. So here's a basic rendering of the tool cart. And yes, this is based off the popular design that a lot of others have made, but I've taken a few bits and pieces from all those different designs and morphed them into one that works for me and my shop. Anyway, it's going to be made from 3 main parts: the body, the rotating platform, and the drawer. Let's remove those last 2 parts and focus on the body of the cart. The body is going to be made from a few panels of plywood held together with some pocket hole screws, and the sides are going to have this hole that will hold a metal pipe for the platform to rotate around, and then the notches on each side that will allow the hardware to lock the platform from rotating. But we'll get more into that later. For now, let's jump into the shop and knock out this main body. I started by trimming those oversized pieces down to their final size of the table saw, since it's a lot more accurate.
So now that we have most of the pieces cut for the main cabinet, I'm going to grab some of the scrap walnut here and make some edge banding to cover up the edge of the plywood.
Now this step is 100% optional. I've never actually made hardwood edge banding, so I figured a shop project like this was the perfect place to try it out. In fact, shop projects are where I test tons of stuff out. New finishes, joinery techniques, all kinds of stuff. That way, if I mess it up, it doesn't really matter. After I ripped a few strips of walnut down to about 1/8 inch thick, I could spread some glue on the edge of the plywood and then apply the edge banding. I used some painter's tape here to act as a clamp, but you could also just shoot a few brad nails in if you're in a rush. Once the glue is cured, I remove the tape and use a flush trim saw to remove the excess hardwood on the ends. To trim the excess off the sides, I'm going to utilize my vertical panel jig thing. The only problem here is that the bottom of the sled doesn't give enough clearance for the blade. So I'm going to flip this thing around, lay down a scrap piece of plywood to give just a little bit of space, and then attach a sheet of MDF to this side of the jig with some countersunk screws. And now I can raise the blade and slide the jig over until it's just barely underneath this auxiliary fence. I just ran the panel vertical through the blade to trim the excess edge banding off. Oh, and if you're uncomfortable doing this, just use a router and a flush trim bit. Now those panels I made are going to make up the top and the bottom part that holds the drawer box, but I also need to cut down a piece for the back section. I ripped down another strip like the cut list specifies, and then I cut it to my rough length with the circular saw. I trust my table saw crosscut sled a lot more than my circular saw, so I'll dial in the final length here.
Alright, so to start the assembly, we're going to use everybody's favorite construction method, and that's a domino. I'm just kidding. We're going to use pocket holes. See?
Now you really won't see me use pocket holes much, unless it's for drawer boxes or something like a shop project. I just don't like the way that they look. However, they're incredibly fast and easy to do, and they're completely hidden on this project, so I'm okay with it. Just to help support everything, I'm going to set down a few scrap spacers while I add the bottom shelf. Now I'm not going to be able to get my drill inside that box, so I'm going to countersink some screws on the underside, and you'll never see these. That is, unless you're laying on the floor of my garage. Then seeing a few screws is probably the least of your worries. Anyway, with the bottom section of the main body finished, I need to add some more edge banding to the side panels, which I did the same way that I showed before. These side panels need notches cut out to fit the locking hardware for the flip top, and they also need a hole to allow the metal pipe to go through. I'll use my jigsaw to cut these slots, and while I finish doing that, I want to remind you that I'm also on Instagram at Spencley Design Co. That's where I post tons of behind the scenes pictures and videos, and where you can keep up with me on a daily basis. Plus, I do giveaways, and you can find out about all my projects way before they make it here to YouTube. Oh, and there you can also... Wait, hold on. Alright, sorry. Management said I had to leave you alone from now and get back to the build. I used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to drill out the holes for the metal pipe, and now these are ready to attach to the bottom section. I'll use a few clamps to hold all the panels in place, and then fasten it all together with a few pocket screws. While the clamps are on, I'll flip it over and add some screws down here too. Next, I'll screw on the casters. Now, as someone who's notoriously cheap, I'm telling you not to buy the cheap casters. Sure, these ones are around $8 a wheel, but they're substantially better than the cheaper ones. Plus, once you have a few £100 from all the wood and machines on here, you're going to need good casters, so don't be cheap. Speaking of cheap, if you're like me, you probably don't want to go buy more screws when you're in the middle of a project. And as you can see, my screws went all the way through the plywood, but I'll bring out the old angle grinder to take care of that.
So we're now at the point that we're gonna start making the top flip component. Now I got this large metal rod, so it's gonna thread through here, and we'll cut it off later, but now you can see the part up here that's actually gonna start tilting, and we're gonna build that next.
I'll start off by ripping down some pieces of plywood according to the plans, and then bringing these pieces to their final length on the crosscut sled. I'm going to be making this rotating panel out of 4 pieces. Let's call these pieces the bread pieces, and these pieces the, well, whatever your favorite deli meat is. Turkey, roast beef, capicola, you pick. Let's call them the capicola pieces. The capicola is going to be sandwiched between the 2 pieces of bread, and the capicola pieces need a small slot cut in them to hold the eye bolt, which will lock the rotating shelf from moving. That all felt really wordy, so let's just get back to the building. So like I said, I need to cut a slot right about here. I tried thinking of some easy ways to do it, but I think this vertical panel jig was really the only thing that I could think of. After making one pass, I can flip the panel around and clamp it back onto the jig. Then, after making a second pass, the eye bolt fits in perfectly. With these slots cut into the capicola later, I can start to assemble the sandwich. I'll lay the 2 capicola pieces down on top of one of the pieces of bread and sandwich the metal pipe in between the 2. A few brad nails will hold these pieces in place while the glue dries. Now before I add the other piece of bread, I'm going to take some of this paste wax and jam a lot into the void where the metal pipe goes. This will just allow the platform to rotate a little bit better. Plus, it's like adding a nice layer of mayonnaise to a sandwich. After applying some more glue on top of the capicola, I could add a second piece of bread and hold the whole thing together with some more brad nails. Now, admittedly, I did a terrible job at laminating these panels together. Luckily, I always cut these pieces oversized so I can trim them down to their final size after the lamination. Now you could definitely use a track saw to get this done, or you could just run it through a table saw. With all the edges cleaned up, I'll add some more edge banding to this piece too. Once that's cleaned up, I'll drill a hole all the way through the sandwich for a bolt, and then use a Forstner bit to clear out the place for the washer and the nut to sit in. And looking back, I should have done it in the opposite order to keep the bit from jumping around so much. So, there's some advice for you. And for the locking hardware, I used a bolt, a washer, an eye bolt, another washer, and then a nut. And now the sandwich is ready to get added to the cabinet. I'll push the metal rod through the sandwich and insert a large washer between the sandwich and the side panel. After a little persuasion, the pipe fit through and this thing can easily rotate. With a scrap piece of wood, I'll mark where I need to trim the metal pipe. Now this can easily be done with a metal specific blade on the jigsaw. But an angle grinder is a little more exciting. While I do my best Taylor Swift impression and try to make sparks fly, I wanted to thank all my Patreon supporters for helping me get closer to quitting my day job and taking this channel full time. I'm excited to announce that I now have exclusive merch rewards for all of my supporters, including stickers, t-shirts, and sweatshirts that aren't available anywhere else. If you want to check out all the rewards that I have available for you, check out my Patreon page and consider supporting the channel. And I want to be crystal clear, please do not feel pressured at all. Just watching these videos, hitting the like button, or leaving a comment is already a huge help, and I thank you for that.
Alright, so with that done, the next thing that I want to work on is the bottom drawer that's going to go right here.
Now there are a ton of different ways to make drawer boxes, but they always start out with the process of first cutting the side panels to their final size, and then inserting the drawer slides on each side to measure the final distance for the front and back panel. And in this case, about 27 9/16 instead of the 27.5 that's on the plans. I'll cut the front and back panels down to that final length, and it fits like a glove. My preferred method for making drawer boxes is to make a small rabbet to hold the bottom panel. I'll start by setting the blade to about 3/8 of an inch high and making a pass with the fence set at 1/2 of an inch on all the drawer pieces except the back. Once the blade stops, I'll slide the fence over and make one more pass to finalize the dado. Now, I can mark where I need to trim that back panel just above where the dado was cut. The front and back panels of the drawer will get a few pocket holes to help hold everything together. And now I can cut the bottom panel down to its final size and pop it in the drawer. And the reason I like this construction method is because it automatically squares up the drawer as long as the bottom panel is cut correctly. A few screws will hold the bottom panel in securely. I'll set the drawer slides on top of some scrap pieces and push the slide back the thickness of a 3/4 inch piece of scrap plywood. Then I can drive some screws in and secure the slides. Next, I set down some 1/2 inch scrap pieces to hold the drawer box off the bottom of the case. Then I can screw in the drawer slide, starting with the front screw and slowly sliding the drawer out to get to the other screw locations. And I couldn't reach that last mounting hole with the drawer in place, so I just removed it to get access to that very back hole.
That's what she said.
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
There he is. Come on.
And now the drawer works perfectly. I'm going to be adding a small round over to all of the edges to make everything soft to the touch. And then I'm going to apply some finish to everything before I put it all together. While the finish dries, I'm going to cut down some small blocks that will help hold the metal pipe in place. I'll drill a small hole with a Forstner bit, and that hole will slide over the metal pipe, holding it down in place. I pre-drilled and countersunk some screws into the inside that will hold these pieces in place, and now I can add my tools to the cart. The first one that I'm going to be adding is my spindle and belt sander. A few screws with washers will be plenty to hold this securely in place. And now you can witness that sweet rotating action. And really the whole reason I built this thing was for my new planer. I might have to adjust the positioning a little bit since the weight is slightly off balance, but that's easy to fix.
All right, so at this point, I mean, the cart's done, but if you follow along closely, you've likely noticed that there's one thing missing. And the thing that's missing is that drawer front right here. Now you could very easily just slap a piece of plywood on there and call it a day, but I want to try something a little different, so let's check it out.
I grabbed a piece of plywood that I cut down to rough size and started marking a ton of random cut marks that are about 1/8 of an inch deep. Now, I'm not much of a fan of all the epoxy work that's really popular, but just for fun, I wanted to try something different out. I measured out some epoxy into a cup and added some bright blue pigment. Once the epoxy cured, I started by sanding off all the excess epoxy, but then had a slight change of heart.
So as I was sanding down the drawer front, I kept looking back at my planer and thinking, why don't I just run it through there? Now I know with plywood it's gonna blow out the top veneer and everything like that, but I actually wanna make it kind of interesting and I wanna see what it looks like.
I grabbed some of these drawer pulls from the home center and used this Craig cabinet hardware jig to drill out the perfect holes. With the holes drilled, I removed the masking tape I used to help mark the drilling locations, and I could move over to installing the drawer front. I set the drawer front in place and then evenly shimmed out the spacing with the help of some playing cards. I can then drill through the holes in the front and then feed bolts through the back of the drawer to hold the drawer pull on. A couple screws drilled in from the back of the drawer will hold the drawer front on securely, and then this thing is officially finished.
I'm so happy to finally have this tool cart done. It's gonna save me a ton of storage space in the shop, and I can't wait to use this planer a little bit more in some more projects. Now, if you didn't know, the space that I'm in here is actually an apartment garage, so I don't have a lot of space to work with. So stacking my tools on top of each other like this is the perfect solution for a really small shop. Now, if you'd like to build this for yourself, as a reminder, I do have plans linked down in the description below. So thanks again for stopping by and checking out my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.